Hey guys, this is Scott Tabor. In this video, I want to show you 10 mistakes that are killing your guitar playing. I've been teaching for decades. I've seen all kinds of mistakes, but these 10 are the ones that are keeping you from progressing the most. So these are numbered in reverse, with the number 1 being the most egregious or the problem that you should fix the most. If you can take just one of these mistakes, notice it in your own playing and correct it, you're going to become a better guitarist way sooner. And when I see these mistakes in my students and we're able to correct a few of these, I see instant improvement. One quick caveat before we start, there's no one way to play the guitar, and yeah, you can play a bunch of different ways. Sometimes you have to practice more to play in those ways that are wrong. And some mistakes are not mistakes in some cases and are in others. I'm going to point those out, and here we go. Number 10 is playing too quietly. Now you might think that this doesn't matter at all. Who cares if you play loud or quiet? But I've seen this happen in so many people. A lot of times it's when you live in an apartment or you live with other people and you don't want to disturb them, especially when you're first starting to learn and you might be a little bit timid or not super confident in your playing. What you're trying to do is be as quiet as possible so you don't disturb people. But what that does is it programs you to make these little weeny motions with your fingers. Now, of course, we're just talking about the right hand. Your left hand doesn't produce any volume. But in the right hand, whether you're using a pick or your fingers, if you always play quietly, you're going to be locking in these motions that are really super small, and it's going to be so hard to get rid of that and deprogram it from your fingers. So what you should do is play really, when you're practicing, as loudly as you can, and that might sound counterintuitive, but the more loudly we can play, the more command that we're going to have over the string and over our fingers, and we can always play more quietly later for even more control over the string. What can you do if you're playing late at night and you don't want to disturb people? If you have a solid body electric, that's great because you're not going to make a lot of noise anyway. But on acoustic guitar, nylon string or steel string, things that we can do would be to just stuff a bunch of material in here, socks or underwear or whatever, under the strings. And then when you play them, you're not going to be vibrating and the sound hole won't be resonating. You can stuff a bunch of stuff in there too, and foam will work. The easiest fix is to get a little piece of foam and just shove it under here all the way back to the bridge, and it mutes the strings pretty well. And what that does is actually, because the strings are muffled, it kind of forces you to play louder because the guitar isn't making any noise. One thing I would suggest doing is getting a silent guitar, if you can find one of these. This one doesn't have a resonating body. There's a couple companies, Yamaha makes one like this, and we can just, not in tune, and you can just sit there all night. Yeah, I'm making some noise, but usually, you know, if somebody's in the next room, they're not going to hear this, and you're just going to be digging into the string as loudly as you can, and that's just getting a better workout for your fingers. And as I said before, if we just lighten up, we can play even faster with even more control. Number 9 is knuckle collapsing. This happens to a lot of people in the ring finger, and it's going to happen on both hands too. We do not want to do this unless we're playing a chord like that. So there's a case where it's not a mistake depending on the context. But what happens, I don't know why it's the ring finger for a lot of people, but what we're trying to do is to be on our fingertip more, right? And not let the knuckle fold inward like that. And that's important because if you want to play anything fast, that's going to totally slow you down and just completely hobble your playing. So what we need is a little more firmness in that knuckle. Just imagine you're scratching yourself, okay, like this. Now you wouldn't scratch yourself and let your ring finger buckle inward like that because you're not going to be able to get your nail into the skin. So just imagine that motion that gives you a little more pressure or tension over that knuckle, and then when you press in, it doesn't collapse. So if you can think of that when you press your finger down here, it's not going to do that. Also on the right hand, if you play finger style, certainly classical stuff, it's your ring finger that does this a lot, but I see it happening in people's fingers all over the place. You can let these fold in if you're playing rest strokes. Kind of an old school way to do rest strokes, but most of the time this is kind of what we can loosely call finger picking. We want to think of that scratch motion. You're scratching an itch. We want to not let that ring finger fold inward like that. And it's hard to do, especially if your nails are too long. They're going to get the resistance against the string and they're going to want to go backwards. So maybe your nails are too long. Shorten those up, file them down. Don't clip them with a clipper, always file them. Make sure that they're smooth, and we're just scratching like this so that your knuckle won't collapse. Number 8 is not placing all your fingers down at once when you get to a chord. I can hear people doing this even when I'm not actually seeing them play, and this happens a lot. We usually take our stronger finger, let's play a C chord, and we put that one down first, then that one, and you know, sometimes we know that things are a mistake or that we're doing something that's kind of inefficient, but we're like, but if we notice it, we go, oh, I know not to do that. But you are every time that you play the guitar, no matter what you're doing, certainly the more time you spend, you are programming your fingers to do something. So even though you might know that this is wrong, putting them down one at a time, In many cases it's wrong, not every case, but most of the time. You can't undo that if you do it over and over and over. So the goal is to have the shape of the chord in the air and get them all down at once. So if you notice yourself doing this where one finger is coming down before the other, notice which one it is and do the opposite. So my philosophy is if we have a problem with something, we need to say, okay, what's the correction for it? And let's go way the other direction and overcorrect it. And somewhere between that overcorrection and what you've been doing is the perfect sweet spot where we want to be. So if I go to the C chord again, and I'm doing this wrong, okay, index finger, then that one and that one, do it the other way. Put this one down first, then that one, and then that one. So put down the one that's latest, put that one down first. The more quickly you can get to that one, these are already primed to get down quickly anyway. So if you do that enough, we're just kind of trying to even it out on the other side. Weaker finger first, and then those. Or one at a time, and then somewhere along the way, they're going to meet and we get them all down at once, and that's the goal. Okay, number 7 is leaving fingers down when you don't need to leave them down. And this is a mistake of tension, and tension is our biggest enemy for not just playing guitar, for anything that you're trying to do physical. So to take this example, this exercise, I do this every day of my life. What we don't want to do is go this finger's down, that one, and then that one, and that one. This is an exercise to work on these 4 fingers and get some right and left hand coordination. But all we need right now is pressure over this pinky in this example. And so to have all of these down, we have all this misplaced tension when all we need is tension right here, but very, very little. So I hate to use the word tension, but there's just a little bit of pressure there that we need. And these should be just relaxed, but don't throw them out and come really far away from the string. So we don't need to leave that pressure down on the string. We want our fingers to be in the habit of relaxing when we don't need them, and that'll help you play faster and more freely, and it'll feel better, and that means it's more fun to play. But at the same time, when they come off, don't throw them way out here, because then it takes 10 years to get your fingers back to where you want them. Mistake number 6 is leaving your thumb behind. Everybody does this one. You got to watch out for it because your thumb is there to give you some support. Another mistake is many of us squeeze with the thumb way too hard. We only need a little bit of support there and a little bit of pressure on that thumb, but 99.9 times out of 100, it needs to be right about where your middle finger is. What happens, especially if the back of the neck is kind of sticky, we move up a position like towards the right and your thumb gets left behind and we end up like this. And now we've lost our balance and it torques out your wrist. You start to get a weird wrist angle, and then we can get kinds of pain and tension in the wrist, and that is bad news on both hands. Always keep your wrists relaxed and straight whenever you can. So we really want to strive to have this kind of clamping action here. Of course, the word clamp sounds like we're really tightening up a lot, which we don't want to do. But if we're like this, we just don't have anything really to squeeze against, and you can really start to feel the pain right up here in your inner forearm. So whatever you're doing, make sure that your thumb, even if you're not using your middle finger, is in the range of where your middle finger is. Mistake number 5 is having your thumb over the neck. Now you see everybody, even the best guitarists in the world, doing this, and it all depends on the situation. Now, if you watch my channel and my videos, I'm very much into nylon string guitar. A nylon string classical guitar is going to have a wider neck, so this is an even worse habit if you're playing a nylon string guitar, unless you have a skinny neck. But even then, we don't want to have the thumb over the neck because it's keeping us from doing more difficult things. Now, the exceptions to this is if you're doing vibrato, or you're bending a string. Having that thumb there gives you a lot of leverage, and I'm kind of palming the guitar, and that's totally perfect for that specific technique. But if you do this all the time, if you first started playing guitar and you put your thumb over and you never got away from doing that, now there's so many things that you're just not going to be able to do if you can't get back to this position, like we were talking about before, thumb where the middle finger is, but behind the neck. Then you have a lot more space here and much more leeway with your fingers, and then you can play more difficult things. So I use my thumb over the neck quite a bit, but it's not my default position. That's what we're trying to get away from. If this is the way that you always approach the guitar, you're going to have problems with difficult stuff. So if I'm playing a D chord, definitely I'll have my thumb come over there. That allows my right hand to just whack away at the strings, and I don't have to worry about that string. But I know the minute that anything gets difficult, I got to get back to this position, and that is my habit, and that's how I can play more advanced stuff. Mistake number 4, these are getting more important and more critical. Your right hand stopping when your left hand leaves the strings. So you're strumming a chord. I got an A minor chord here, right? 3, I'm gonna go to a G chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I left a little bit early, which we always have to do, and it depends on how fast the tempo is anyway, but we have to keep things moving. So your right hand is like a drummer, like it's your rhythm section. You cannot stop the right hand because even the untrained ear can tell when you've stopped and there's a gap in the song. And so I think this comes from when a lot of people first start playing the guitar, they have their thumb over the neck, super bad, right? And they're clamping the guitar like this, and they're holding the guitar that way. And as soon as they take their left hand off, their right hand is looking at the left hand somehow and thinking, oh, I'm not on a string now, so therefore I shouldn't be playing anything. And that is so hard to deprogram, but it's so, so important. So our practice for this would be to just not even have a chord down and strum down, up, get to any chord, A minor, and then take it off, keep the shape. Now we're working on a couple of our mistakes by doing this. One of them is getting the chord formed in the air, right? We're trying to train and prove to your right hand that we can still keep things going even when the left hand is off the strings. Mistake number 3 is for fingerstyle players, classical and any kind of fingerstyle player, and that is having your thumb in the way of your index. Super, super bad for your right hand. So if you're playing arpeggios, for example, I'm going to play a C chord here, and I'm just playing a P-I-M-A-M-I arpeggio. You see how my thumb is to the left of my fingers. What so many people do is their thumb is right here, completely invading the airspace of your index finger and your other fingers, and you might think, well, who cares about that? This gets back to mistake number 10, which is playing too quietly. So what's happening here, when your thumb is in the way of your index finger, it's not allowing your index to make a quality follow-through motion, so you're programming your finger to make that little weenie motion, which we know is not good. And it also doesn't allow your thumb to make a follow-through motion either, so you end up playing really quietly, it sounds bad, and you're torquing your wrist out by being in this weird position like that. So watch the best players in the world, and you'll notice how their thumb is separated. It's not way out here, but it's definitely to the left of your index finger, so they both can make a nice, loud movement, sounds better, and eventually will feel better. A great way to correct this, like I was saying earlier, let's overcompensate. If your thumb is too far this way, get it way, way, way far the other direction, and just sit like this and watch the news. Like, you just have to get used to having this giant separation like this. Even maybe play the thumb, put it back, play a block chord or something. Now this looks very weird and it feels weird, but if we can get kind of used to doing this, then somewhere between this and what you were doing, which was wrong before, is the perfect spot we want to be in. Mistake number 2 is a mistake of reading music, but it has super important consequences for our technique, and that is stopping at the end of a measure or end of a phrase. Now we all know when you're reading music, whether it's tablature or standard notation, when we get to the end of a measure, we see that vertical line, and we know that that's just imaginary. It doesn't mean that we're supposed to stop, but so many of us do. And what that's doing is, like earlier when we were talking about your right hand waiting for your left hand, you're programming in this gap that you don't even know that you're programming in. It's one of those things where you might even know that you're not supposed to stop there, but you stop anyway, and you think, oh, well, if I know I'm not supposed to stop, then it doesn't matter if I stop. Wrong. Every time you do that, you are programming yourself to stop there, and then you have to spend a bunch more time getting rid of those gaps that you've made. And mistake number 1 is a mistake that I think is holding us back the most when it comes to our technique and progressing, and that is looking at your hands way too much. Now, you shouldn't even look at your right hand at all. Once we program that in, whether you're playing with a pick or whatever, I think it really is disruptive to be looking at your right hand. If you make a mistake over and over and over and you can't figure out, then you can look down there and go, what's going on? But in the left hand is where I see people looking the most, and there's so many bad things that can happen from this. I could just go on and on about it. You're bending your neck over, bad for your neck. You're leaning over, bad for your back. The guitar starts to go like this, bad for your wrist. And what you're trying to do is get this bird's eye view that we never can truly get. But if you try to actually get a good view, what you're doing is you're waiting for visual confirmation that your finger is there. So you're creating this one extra step and delay in the process of playing. So you're going, is my ring finger there? Oh, it is. Now I'm gonna play. But I bet if you close your eyes or just try not to look, your fingers will go where you want them to go 9 times out of 10. And I do this with my students all the time. I make them close their eyes or get them to not look over there, and something that they were just playing really slowly or having trouble with, their fingers go right to. And you really have to prove it to yourself by closing your eyes and play something that you're working on, provided that you're in one position. When you shift positions, yeah, you can glance down there, but even then we're not getting a great view. Like right now, I can see that my ring finger is on the 5th fret of the 2nd string. I can feel that, and I can see my finger underneath the 6th string, and that's how you should be viewing your fingers. But even then, if you stare intently at that finger, waiting to see if you're there, you're wasting way too much time. You need to trust your fingers because they really do know where they are. Those are the 10 mistakes that I see all the time that are really holding people back. If you can notice any of these mistakes in your own playing and correct them, you are going to get better a lot faster, and you're going to see the difference in your playing. The more efficiently we can play, the more fun it is to play, and the more you're going to want to play, and the better you'll get. I've got all kinds of fixes for these mistakes. If you check out this next video, I'm going to show you how to correct a specific mistake from the video you just watched with a simple exercise you can get down in just a few seconds.